So I went and downloaded the wiring schematic for this painless wiring dual battery kit. So yeah, it looks like over the last 25 years they've made a few changes to their dual battery control kit, but it's pretty much the same. So you have here's your toggle switch, and you've got the green LED. I guess they call that mode 1, which is the automatic mode. And then if your switch is in the middle, it's basically off. And then the red LED is for the jump start mode. And the way that is wired here, you've got your solenoid. This solenoid basically has two contacts. One is to the main battery on this side, and then your auxiliary battery connects to this side, and there's a brown wire that runs into the switch, and that's the same as what I have. And then there's a yellow wire that runs to the solenoid coil, and then that pulls in the contacts right there. Right here you've got the green wire is for the ignition circuit. The ignition is associated with this LED, and then this LED is associated with the auxiliary battery. This diagram is kind of backwards, like the ignition should be on this side and the auxiliary on that side. So it's a little bit different than what I have, but it basically gives you the idea here. I think the switch I have, there's some problem with the way they wired it. But to be fair, they did contact me after I purchased it, and I guess the deal was I could send the kit back and they would replace it. But I had already installed everything, and I thought it was only the current limiting resistor for the LEDs that was bad. But after I fixed up the LEDs, so I put a resistor in line with the LEDs that I have. When I go to the red, the auxiliary or jump start mode, the red LED turns on, the solenoid turns on, everything's fine. When I go to the middle, both turn off. But when I go over to the green side, even if the ignition is off, the LED is on. Maybe they hooked up the resistors to the wrong pins inside on the switch. So somehow when the switch is over here, it's got to be sending power from the auxiliary battery over to the green LED. So it's like, I'm not sure I want to have those kind of connections inside. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut the 3 wires to the switch and hook in my own switch. I've basically figured out what the circuit is here. And if we flip that around, hopefully this makes sense. Here you've got your ignition power on the green wire. You've got the auxiliary battery here on the brown wire. And then you've got your solenoid coil is the yellow wire. And then that solenoid is grounded up to the firewall. And then I've got my green and red LED here. So a double pole, double throw switch here. And I've drawn it kind of 2 separate switches. The upper contact is tied to the green ignition wire, and then the lower contact is tied to the green LED. And then over here you've got the brown wire hooked to the other contact, and the red LED is hooked to that. So these 2 contacts are on the same side of the switch. And then in the middle, what I did was just take the yellow solenoid connection and I put a jumper across to the other common terminal here, and that way if you switch over to ignition here, you're going to have ignition 12 volts coming through here, going down here, turning on the solenoid, but it'll also flow down here and then over here and turn on the green LED. And when you're in the middle, there's no connection here, there's no connection here. And then likewise, if you go over to the auxiliary battery, the jump start mode, you're connected here. Current flows to the solenoid, it turns on, powered by the auxiliary battery. And then through this jumper, it'll turn on the red LED. So here's my switch. So I've got the auxiliary battery connections on this side, the ignition connections on this side. What I did To solve another problem, I was wanting an ignition power source inside the cab of the truck so that I can run my house battery relays. I just put 2 wires on that switch terminal. One goes to the ignition source and the other one goes to my house battery relay. So I don't have to run another wire through the firewall with ignition power. The original painless switch had all the wires hardwired into the switch, and then the whole switch was potted, and then you had to run that wire through the firewall over and pick up the ignition power. So I didn't have any connector I could tap into here. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, as they say. And then here's my little jumper here from the solenoid wire, and then I jumper over to the center contact, and then my auxiliary battery hooks up here. Yeah, that's basically how you can wire up one of these dual battery solenoids. It's just a double pole, double throw switch. You just jumper the moving contacts together, and then one side is ignition and the other side is auxiliary. I got to go cut the wires on the painless switch and crimping on connectors onto the green, yellow, and brown. Yeah, so anyway, I'll go do that and then we'll go test it and see if it works. So stay tuned for that.